markers to look for is the interleukin-6 is an inflammatory marker, and then the cardio C-reactive protein, the CRP levels, they can look at that. There are studies, Despina, that look at women with PCOS and women without, and across the board, regardless of their weight or their age, they find that those that have PCOS have higher CRP levels. And that's that low-grade inflammation.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode brought to you by Let's Get Checked. You can save 20% off your purchase by visiting tiyLGC.com/PCOS and using the code PCOS20 at checkout. This episode is also brought to you by Polly, the go-to marketplace for women looking to find a virtual hormone health specialist. Right now you can save $10 on your first Polly appointment using the code PCOS Oracle. That's PCOS Oracle, ORACLE. Visit polly.co or visit @polly.co on Instagram today and find the right specialist for you. Now I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to episode 63 of the PCOS Oracle Podcast. And in today's episode, I speak with Angela Grassi about the link between inflammation and PCOS. Angela is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and the founder of PCOS Nutrition Center, where for over 20 years, she has been providing evidence-based nutrition information and coaching to people with PCOS. Angela is the author of several books on PCOS, including the PCOS Workbook, Your Guide to Complete Physical and Emotional Health, and the PCOS Nutrition Center Cookbook. Angela provides nutrition education to registered dietitians and healthcare professionals through her book, PCOS, The Dietitian's Guide, and her online PCOS training course for dietitians. Recognized by Today's Dietitian as one of the top 10 incredible dietitians making a difference, Angela is a past recipient of the Ricardo Aziz PCOS Challenge Advocacy Leadership Award, the Outstanding Nutrition Entrepreneur Award, the Award in Excellence in Practice in Women's Health, and the Award for Excellence in Graduate Research for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. She's a member of the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, the Androgen X Society, Dietitians in Functional and Nutritional Medicine, and Women's Health. Angela is an adjunct professor at West Chester University and conducts research on PCOS. Having PCOS herself, Angela has been dedicated to advocacy, education, and research of the syndrome. For more information, visit the PCOS Nutrition Center website, PCOSnutrition.com. Hello and welcome to the PCOS Oracle Podcast, Angela. It's such an honor to have you on the podcast. You've been educating and supporting women for so many years that have PCOS, so I was honored that you agreed to come on the podcast. You've been a source of empowerment and inspiration, and I just want to take a second to say thank you for everything you've done and continue to do for women with PCOS. Now, our topic today is inflammation. Inflammation is a huge topic. It's something that research shows impacts the majority of women with PCOS. So it's something that we need to know and understand and know exactly how we can go about reducing that inflammation to help with reversing the symptoms, balancing our hormones. So before we touch on the stuff about what we can do, let's kind of backtrack and tell our listeners exactly what inflammation is and what the link is with PCOS.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me today. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here and talking with your listeners. And I have PCOS myself. And like you, after I was diagnosed, I really wanted to get the education out, because back then, over 20 years ago, when I was diagnosed, there was really nothing. And I really had to learn myself and read all the research. And I'm really passionate, like you are, about education. So it's great to be here. And inflammation and PCOS is so important to address and to really understand. So yeah, let's talk about inflammation. There's really two main types of inflammation. And first of all, inflammation can be good. A lot of people think it's awful to have inflammation, but if we think of like an acute inflammation, if we slam our finger in a door, ow, a lot of pain, swelling, that's all inflammation. So that's our body's natural response. So that's actually a good inflammatory response. It's short term. Like I said, it's acute. But unfortunately, what we see happening in PCOS is that we have this low grade inflammation, this chronic lingering. It doesn't really have a clear beginning, middle, or an end. So essentially, it never stops. It just keeps lingering in your immune system. So your body is kind of constantly fighting inflammation, constantly in this fight or flight response, and it really wears down your body and your immune system.
Yeah. So, like you said, it can be the acute, the chronic. So a lot of the time I kind of link it with exercise. Obviously, exercise is a stressor and you get that acute inflammation. And if you don't take that stress, you don't take that time off from exercising, that over-exercising can lead to that chronic inflammation. So we have to, distinguish between the two. Like, it's inflammation is not, inflammation is super bad. It's something we have to be afraid of. We just have to know when that chronic, when you kind of tip over the edge and go from acute to chronic, and know what we need to do to obviously lower that chronic inflammation to, prevent further issues from occurring. So let's kind of touch on, in relation with PCOS, how does that information come about? What's the reason for it?
There are so many reasons, and this is what's so frustrating about PCOS, is that we still don't know enough about it. Part of that reason, I know in the United States that the National Institutes of Health only allocates like less than 0.1% of funding to PCOS research. So then we don't have the research and the research studies. We can't do trials and learn more about PCOS. But there are some indicators so far of what causes inflammation in PCOS. The first is genetics. We just kind of inherit this environment. We see that genetic fetal programming, or being exposed to high testosterone levels in utero and high levels of inflammation then can, participate that. We also see that extra exercise, like as you mentioned, excessive intense exercise can be a cause of inflammation. But we see a lot of times that it can be lifestyle related, like how you eat, your sleep, your stress level, that plays a huge role in inflammation. And even just having like higher testosterone levels, we see that testosterone actually influences inflammation and influences insulin, which also influences inflammation. So it's this whole cascade of hormones that keep interfering with each other and worsening this inflammation. Yeah, it's really challenging.
And with there's always this research about saying, is insulin resistance what causes inflammation, or is it the inflammation that causes insulin resistance? It's just like you said, there's never that clear, this is the reason for it. It's always conflicting information, or just like it could be that causes that and vice versa kind of thing. So it's
right, it's hard to figure that out, but they're all interrelated is the bottom line. It's really frustrating though, as someone with PCOS, and it's just has no rhyme or reason sometimes.
Yeah.
So it can be crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can a woman with PCOS, how can someone find out if they have inflammation, if they're suffering from chronic inflammation? Are there symptoms? What are the tests that they can do to find out if this is something they need to work on?
Sure, and you can get blood tests done. 2 markers to look for is the interleukin-6 is an inflammatory marker, and then the cardio C-reactive protein, the CRP levels, they can look at that. There are studies, Despina, that look at women with PCOS and women without, and across the board, regardless of their weight or their age, they find that those that have PCOS have higher CRP levels. Mm. And that's that low-grade inflammation we were talking about. So blood tests can definitely show that, and you can ask your doctor to check those if they're not checking them. But just like physical signs of it, like fatigue is a really big one, trouble sleeping, frequent colds, getting sick a lot is a sign that you have a lot of inflammation going on. Joint pain is a big sign, like things hurting a lot, muscle pain. These would all be signs of inflammation.
Yeah, because
Skin, sometimes your skin will react too with rashes or
skin conditions, because at the end of the day,
acne.
inflammation is the whole immune system thinks it's being under attack. So, you get ill all the time. If you constantly have that, you're ill, your immune system's become weak. It's not, on that. It's not properly defending everything because it's kind of fighting something else, whatever it might be fighting. And I think another common, what research is suggesting that a lot of women are taking is the birth control pill, which has been linked with triggering inflammation. And it's just, sometimes you wonder why women are being prescribed the birth control pill when, I feel like the birth control pill can have, I'm not saying, don't take it if you feel like you need to take it for some specific reason, but I feel like if doctors kind of knew the fact that it causes all this kind of stuff and women are suffering from inflammation, you would think that they probably wouldn't be giving it. But on the other hand, women who are on the birth control pill then do get PCOS, pill-induced PCOS, which could be attributing to their kind of symptoms. So it's always just so complicated and just I
hear you. And it's still like with the PCOS evidence-based guidelines, the international ones that came out last year, they recommend birth control as the first line treatment of PCOS. And you're absolutely right. And the thing about birth control, talking about inflammations, we do see that taking oral contraceptives does increase CRP levels. And we also see that it increases cholesterol and triglycerides as well. So is it just a Band-Aid? Is it making it PCOS worse? Of course, some people need to be on it. I'm not gonna dispute that, but there are some negative side effects for sure. Yeah. But talking about like the immune system, like what you mentioned, there is a correlation with androgens and higher androgen levels with poor and less diverse gut bacteria. And our immune system largely is regulated by our gut, really. So, how much inflammation is caused, again, with the correlation with those high androgens.
Yeah, exactly. I think the research was like 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut or something like that. So it's pretty huge, and it's obviously gut also affects the brain because there's the whole dopamine. All this kind of stuff, it's just everything's so connected. So you have to realize that focusing on one thing isn't going to kind of fix the problem. You have to kind of take that holistic approach and address things. Integrative
and functional medicine. Yeah, getting to the root causes, and all of that can affect mood too. And we do see higher rates of mood disorders like anxiety and depression and bipolar depression in the PCOS population.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of these nutrition, lifestyle tips that you can recommend to our listeners that can help them lower inflammation and balance their hormones?
Yeah. Well, the first one is to prioritize sleep because our body really heal itself while we're sleeping. So it helps relax us, helps bring down those inflammatory markers. If you do have trouble sleeping, I would suggest working with somebody to help with that, whether it's anxiety related, working on anxiety, or there is a huge correlation with obstructive sleep apnea and PCOS, and that can increase inflammation. So when I'm working with patients, I'm always screening them from day one. Tell me about your sleep, and do you snore? If you don't have like a bed partner, there's apps that can actually record you sleeping to see if you're snoring. And right now, they really do a better job with at-home sleep studies. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to have to go to the lab. They're going to watch me sleep. It's never going to work. But the at-home sleep study tests are pretty accurate now. So they usually start with that. So sleep is definitely one way to decrease inflammation. Another way is the exercise, which you can talk more about, but I find that yoga, we have studies that more relaxing types of exercise and not so intense can actually bring down inflammation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I guess it's that whole link with stress again, because stress obviously can increase inflammation, and obviously with yoga, it it kind of turns on that parasympathetic nervous system, which kind of relaxes you, so reduces that stress. Then that can reduce the inflammation. It kind of all just, it's all interrelated. So working on one thing will help the other thing, and then the other thing, and the other thing is like a dominoes as well. Just work.
It is. Are you a fan of yoga for PCOS?
Yeah, I always kind of recommend yoga to my listeners and to my community, because I feel like, and I was doing it as well. At one point I was like, oh no, yoga's like not, because at the beginning of my journey I was like, oh, it's not intense enough, it's not going to do this, it's not going to do that. And I was always against yoga. And then like this past year or two, I was proper into it. I was doing it. I went in to do hot yoga. I just felt so much better with the whole relaxation, and you just feel on another level. You just kind of feel a little bit more at peace and calm and balanced, and it just kind of has that knock-on effect with hormones. So I definitely recommend, not just focusing so much on going to the gym and running and all this kind of stuff, but implementing the calming kind of workouts to just de-stress and relax you. I think it's good to have that balance. It's not just about one kind of workout program.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, are always focused on, well, I have to get my heart rate up and I have to sweat and burn all these calories, and yoga doesn't do that. But I know when I do yoga, it's like almost like you feel the inflammation just coming down.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just good to have that balance. And like you said, it's not always about that constant go, because again, another kind of aspect women suffer from is the whole adrenal PCOS, which is constant high chronic stress. So we have to kind of understand that it's not about constantly being on the go and doing stuff all the time, but really understand that PCOS, we're affected by stress, just like everyone is. Everyone is impacted by stress. Whatever it is, there's always a stress out there that we might not even know we're being affected by. So doing stuff every day in our daily life, like yoga or meditating or something that just kind of brings us back and lowers that cortisol, is really important, because life isn't all about go all the time, especially if you're trying to reverse your PCOS symptoms and balance your hormones and just people in general.
Right, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to do less, right?
Exactly. So
yeah, but that's stress. I mean, it's never going to go away. We're always going to be faced with stress. So it's how we manage it. I actually wrote a workbook it's called the PCOS Workbook, and I wrote it with a psychologist, and we discussed stress and the importance of mindfulness, not just sitting there meditating, clearing your mind, but mindfulness is more about being in the present. So not thinking about the future, what am I going to be doing, tomorrow, or this needs to be done, or thinking about the past. But it's just focusing on the here and now, like, taking a minute just to think about like your posture and what you're hearing and the noises around you, and just how you're feeling, the temperature, things like that, just checking in with your body at that moment. That's a form of mindfulness.
Yeah, touching on your new workbook, which I'm going to have in the show notes, kind of like the whole mindfulness, it kind of reminds me of the book Power of Now that I was reading a while ago. But just the fact that you're not thinking about the future and you're not thinking about the past, but you're just in the present moment, and all those kind of emotional thoughts that come in, you kind of just let them come in, and then like they just leave again. So not sitting with them. And I think it's really important to be doing. So I don't know, can you kind of touch on a bit about your workbook, seeing as you've kind of been discussing a bit, like what can our listeners find in this workbook? What can they kind of get from it?
Yeah, the workbook, it's been around for 10 years. We just came out with the second edition last year. And it's very behavior-based. It really talks about PCOS, and there's a big nutrition chapter to really understand, and we discuss a lot of food myths that is out there in the PCOS community, which there's a lot of confusion, and so we clear up that confusion. But it really has chapters about mindfulness and mindful eating. And it has chapters on stress, body image, exercise, mental health. As I said, my co-author is a psychologist. And we actually came out with a course called PCOS Complete that addresses a lot of these aspects too. for someone that likes the virtual aspect. Yeah, instead of reading a book.
Yeah, I think that virtual aspect of just watching videos or stuff like that is really engaging for a lot of people who just don't really like sitting there reading text and book.
Yeah, exactly. And then to be as part of a community, that's really helpful with like-minded people. That the workbook is focused on a non-diet approach. So it's not about limiting or weighing or measuring. It's more about incorporating foods that, for instance, that can help inflammation and can help to balance hormones a little bit better.
Also, we'll have that everything linked in the show notes. But touching on some of these food myths that I think our listeners would have come across through their Google search and on Instagram, all this kind of stuff is the whole debate of gluten, dairy, and other kind of food sensitivities that can lead to inflammation as well. So what is I know obviously you said that your approach is not non-dietary and not kind of avoiding kind of stuff, but what is your stance on this for our listeners who are stressing about how I have to avoid this and avoid that and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, definitely food can affect inflammation too. And the thing about gluten is we don't have any evidence at all that has been done, any gluten-free diets with PCOS. So it's just kind of opinion. But that being said, I know there's a lot of people that have eaten gluten-free and have seen improvement in their symptoms. So you got to wonder, is it because they have an allergy that's causing inflammation? Do they have a sensitivity to it or an intolerance? Or did they improve their symptoms, or did they lose weight because a big part of their food group was carbs? And so if they went gluten-free, did they lose a lot of those calories, and did that cause the weight loss? It's hard to say. A lot of foods that have gluten in them can also be high FODMAP foods. Have you ever heard of FODMAPs? So this is an acronym for foods basically that are hard for the body to digest for most people, and it can cause inflammation. So is it the gluten itself, or is it the FODMAPs? Is it because they're eating less, they've changed other behaviors at the same time? So I really take an individualized approach. I'm not against it, but I don't think it's the right approach to say everybody with PCOS needs to eat gluten-free. And then as far as the dairy, I think dairy is a big food group that a lot of people have trouble digesting and do have a lot of intolerances to. We do have a little bit of research, that shows fat-free dairy, in particular, like fat-free milk, that can increase androgens and that can increase insulin, but we don't see it with like full fat so much, and we don't see it as much with cheese. So when you say dairy, you could maybe still eat cheese. Some people can tolerate it just fine. It's again, this all or nothing thinking with food and PCOS. And I know people really want some answers and they want to feel better, and they're grasping at straws, but there's not that much evidence to support that. So you really need to take an individualized approach. Everybody's different.
Yeah, we really have to just experiment. And as much as people hate experimenting, just go to, test things out, do trial and error. It's just like, they just want someone to be like, dush, follow this, eat that. And unfortunately, even the coach has to experiment with the client. They have to be like, okay, let's do this. And then the client says it doesn't work. And then you try something else until you figure out, until you as the coach understands the individual, and also the person and the individual, the person with PCOS knows their body better than anyone. So if they eat a certain way, their body's telling them this isn't working for me. Something's wrong. And then you make changes, and maybe down the line when you're working on these changes and they become better, you can reintroduce a specific food like gluten, for example, or dairy. It's just like people are just looking for a cookie cutter program or a quick fix, and just the whole frustration. And it's obviously understandable that it's super frustrating, but like you said, there's not enough research into PCOS either. So
I know, it's so frustrating. The thing is, okay, so if they follow an approach and it works for them, it's probably short term, and that's going to happen. It's not teaching them sustainable lifestyle changes. And that's what I try, whether it's with my one-on-one coaching with clients or with the workbook or my online courses, it's really helping them to develop these sustainable changes and really finding and experimenting with what your body needs.
It really is about just the whole lifestyle change, making something sustainable so you can adhere to it in the long term. Because if you end up, seeing an improvement, if you can follow something for, a month or something and you see an improvement, ask yourself, can I actually do this for the next 10 years, the next 50 years, or however long you're, on this earth for? Because PCOS doesn't just disappear. It's kind of there with you for the rest of your life, but the symptoms won't be there. So you have PCOS, but you have to find an approach that you can adhere to, because PCOS is a lifelong thing that we just have to live with at the end of the day. And we have to understand and accept that. It has to be accepted.
Absolutely.
And touching on some more kind of foods that a lot of our listeners might be thinking about is the nightshade plants and how they can potentially cause inflammation. So do you think this is something women should be worried about and have to, can they still include this into their kind of life? Because I feel like this is like another kind of worry for women, and they always kind of see it.
I know, the nightshades, right? So nightshades are like tomatoes, eggplants, peppers. These are more alkaline foods, and they contain a compound called solanine, and it's believed that some people just can't tolerate these, and that these cause inflammation. It's big with arthritis, that these nightshades can worsen joint pain and inflammation and arthritis, but there's no research at all to support this. But everybody knows their body better than anybody else. So some people know they cannot tolerate tomatoes, that it flares things up for them, or eggplants or things like that. So if that's you, I would say to trust your body, but I don't think to say everybody with PCOS needs to avoid nightshades too.
Yeah. Do you think this is something, when it comes to food, do you think it's something that people kind of have to live with for the rest of their life, or can they kind of, their body kind of adjust to it, and when they introduce it back, it can not cause side effects?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the person. I think sometimes, you just need to get that inflammation down, and then you can reintroduce, like, for example, an apple can be a high FODMAP food for some people. So you cut out apples for a while, but then maybe you introduce just a couple slices, and maybe you can tolerate like a few slices of an apple. Maybe it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Yeah. But some people can actually have full out food allergies, and they can have blood tests done to show if they have high IgE that shows that they actually have an allergy, and those foods really should be cut out because it's going to hurt them long term.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What kind of, are there any, I'm sure our listeners have heard of like the natural anti-inflammatory foods like ginger. Are there any kind of other ones out there that we can implement into our food and our daily lives?
Absolutely. Ginger, turmeric, curcumin, really good for inflammation. Green tea is anti-inflammatory. If anybody likes green tea, having it unsweetened, you can have it cold or hot. But in general, just fiber really helps to improve gut health. And fiber comes from fruits and vegetables and legumes like beans and lentils and whole grains. And those omega-3 unsaturated fats, really great for inflammation too. That's where we're getting like fish, the fattier fish like salmon or tuna, and cooking with like olive oil or avocado oil, all really good sources of fats. Eating avocados, if you like those.
I think I'm really glad that you keep bringing up the fact that fiber and fruit, because I feel like people are just so scared of fruit again. It's just like, when you can like sit down and just think how many foods women have been like told that this is bad, we're just like, what am I supposed to eat? Like, what am I supposed to eat?
Well, that's what most women, I think, with PCOS feel like. They're at a total loss of what to eat. They're so confused, and they're almost scared to eat anything.
Yeah.
A lot of the clients that finally find me, they're desperate. They've hit rock bottom, and they've been binging on food. You know, if you restrict food too much, you can end up binging on it, and that can make your symptoms worse.
Yeah. And I feel like that's why eating disorders are so common with PCOS, because you end up just not knowing what to eat. So you'll just have that unhealthy relationship with food, because you're just, this is bad, this is bad, this is good, this is good. It's just not healthy at all. And it's something
right. So much guilt and shame around food and weight, and it's a very complex and challenging condition, PCOS.
Yeah, for sure. But I feel now with, your website, everyone else kind of coming together on different social media platforms, and we've created this whole community where people just feel more empowered, and I feel like women are feeling more confident with what they need to do to, balance their hormones, reverse their PCOS symptoms, compared to back when 20 years ago when you were diagnosed. I feel like we're moving in the right direction. We're feeling, more optimistic about health and busting all these myths that are just popping up.
I hope so. I hope, people find that there's a lot of support out there, that they're not alone. I still have met some clients that they don't know anybody else with PCOS. Like, I was the only one that they knew. Yeah.
It's amazing how, the power of the internet is always quite cool, how we're able to like interact with people and know that we're not alone. So it's just amazing.
Absolutely.
So where can our listeners connect with you?
Oh, sure. Well, they can go to the PCOS Nutrition Center website. It's simply PCOSnutrition.com. Mm-hmm. And I have lots of free information on there, recipes and some tips. And my books are there. I have a whole supplement store and information about those too.
Awesome. Touching on supplements, what would be some for inflammation before we wrap up?
Absolutely. So the turmeric or curcumin is great for inflammation. Fish oil is particularly great. And if you have those high triglycerides too, fish oil is great for high triglycerides. So those are some really big ones I would look into.
Awesome. What would be your final piece of advice or biggest tip for women who are coming to the end of this episode? What would you say for them to just make a specific change and help lower their inflammation? What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I would say you're not alone. Mm-hmm. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe get some help. Reach out. Don't be afraid to get some help. There's lots of great providers out there, yourself included, to help people. And don't feel like you have to make all these changes at once, because it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's more about discovering or reconnecting with your body and finding out what foods energize you, what kinds of exercise is better for your body. So taking time to look at that and know that it can be better. I know PCOS can feel really hopeless. These symptoms are really out of control and it's never going to get better. My life sucks. But you can definitely take control over this. It can be better. You can improve your labs. You can feel better. You can reduce the inflammation. And it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes. There's a lot of hope and help out there.
I think that's a great final piece of advice and tip. So thank you so much for taking the time out of the day to come on the podcast to join me today. I really appreciate it. I think our listeners have gained some valuable information from you. Highly recommend everyone goes to follow Angela and her books, courses, blog, everything that's available. Her content is, so good and so valuable. As I said, evidence-based information, which is so important when we're looking for true information that we should be following and including to our life. It's not just always that anecdotal, somebody's story. I think knowing that something is evidence-based and has been studied is really important. So thank you so much once again for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's really been a pleasure.